Everybody, welcome back to Made Possible by Pop Culture, the podcast. I'm your host and producer, Danielle Turchiano, in case you didn't already know. And honestly, in case you don't already know what this podcast is about, here it is. I invite guests on every week, and they get to talk about something from their childhood pop culture memory that greatly inspired or influenced them as children. Maybe it helped shape who they became as people, maybe shaped who they became as professionals, maybe both. But it's not just about the nostalgia. We also get to flip to today and we look at what from the modern pop culture world is influencing them, inspiring them, or just plain exciting them today. Okay, listen, if you're watching on the YouTube, I do need to point out, I got that haircut. It is too short. Let's all just move on. Honestly, I want to dive right into this conversation today because I'm thrilled to have on this guest. It's Damian Holbrook. He's a senior writer at TV Guide magazine. And honestly, he is who I think of when I think of TV Guide magazine. So you may also know him, I should point out, as the real Damian. Yes, the inspiration for Damian in Mean Girls. He was a childhood friend of Tina Fey's. Obviously, he inspired her in ways that maybe she would come on to this podcast and talk about. Who knows? But join me for now in welcoming Damian.
Oh my God, that's so funny. That is so, I forget about that sometimes.
No, you don't. Yeah. The musical just came out.
I know. But it's just like, it's so weird, you know? Like, it's just like, oh yeah, that exists.
Right.
But meanwhile, I'm like, I got to unclog my Dyson, you know?
Yeah, you're a real person. You're a regular
person. Normal life, right,
yeah.
Exactly.
But at the same time, I like to point it out because I'm like, that's kind of what this podcast is. Like, you were such an inspiration to Tina Fey that look what she did. So
right,
like,
and it was just like the 20th anniversary of the original movie.
Right.
I was talking with her, and because I sent her a congratulations. Like we do Marco Polo. Have you heard?
I don't know what that is. No.
So it's a video chat platform.
Okay.
So you leave video like messages to one another, and
it's like a lot of work.
Back and forth. It's so much fun. So I sent her one saying, just like congratulating her. I was like, hey, you probably don't even realize this. I just saw it on Instagram that it's the 20th anniversary, and I was like, you really should be proud of just like this little thing that we joked about when she was writing it, like another SNL movie, like that has had such an impact on pop culture and just culture in itself, and that it's lasting and then it's being reinterpreted, and there's just a version of it for every generation that has come since. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I should have signed some kind of contract though.
I mean, I wasn't going to ask you what kind of residuals you get because I kind of assumed you don't, but
I do not. I think this year, Paramount sent me like a digital code for the movie download.
Oh, that's very nice of them. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I get it. There's I think sometimes people think of like, well, it's an honor to have my name.
Exactly. I mean, it's so cool. It's like this weird little superpower. It's like finding out that somebody has like 6 toes or something.
This is better than that.
Yeah,
but
a little bit, yeah.
Well, I mean, I didn't have you on to talk about Mean Girls because obviously that you inspired a part of that, but something else inspired you when you were younger. And I like to ask my guests to just set that up for the audience because it inspired you, you're going to set it up better than I would.
Right.
So you take it away.
So I had grown up loving TV. My parents were huge. Our TV, just like, it was very important because it was a very shared experience in our house. We would grow, it was me and my 2 older brothers, and like Friday nights it was watching the Carol Burnett Show and Donnie and Marie, and like Monday nights my dad was a former soldier and he loved MASH. So there was always something, like Destination TV before it was. And then he had discovered somewhere along the line, I don't know where, Monty Python. And he just thought it was the funniest thing in the world. So like he had us watching it. And then, and again, I'm a child, and he realized, he saw, my parents watched, I think, the first episode of Saturday Night Live, and thought it was just the funniest thing that he had ever seen. Like, they just thought it was weird and wild. And they were like, my dad especially was like, you guys have to see this show. And we're like literally children, like 6 years old, 7 years old, and allowed us to stay up for the second airing, like the second week of SNL. and it was weird back then. Like SNL, when its first year was weird. It had the weird Muppets. It had,
Yeah.
it had all this political stuff. It had all this like, stuff that totally went over our heads. But then there were really funny things like Jim Belushi or John Belushi. So that was the kind of culture I grew up in. Was if my parents saw something like, you got to see this, and then it became The Night Stalker.
Mm.
Which my dad was like, this is so scary. And my mom loved it. And they were like, it has this scary theme song and you guys are going to love it. It's like a monster show every week. And I know that's something that inspired X-Files, which you
Yeah.
love.
Well, I like it. I don't love it as much as some of the people who have come on and been my
Yeah.
guests. I will say that. We went into that.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're a super fan. Yeah. So that was like the trajectory. And then daytime soaps became this whole thing. And so I grew up in this culture where with my family, and then I loved TV and I loved like special event TV, because at that point it was like all the Aaron Spelling shows were happening. And back then, there were three networks. And if a season premiere happened, it was a 2-hour season premiere event. Love Boat, 2 hours, Fantasy Island, 2 hours, Heart to Heart, 2 hours, like all these shows, Charlie's Angels, huge thing. And so I always joke like this Aaron Spelling person was the architect of my youth. Because I was upset, like his shows were glamorous, they were fast paced, they were colorful, everyone was beautiful, everyone was rich. Dynasty then happened. So there was that was like the early years. And then when I went to college and, when I was in high school, that stuff started to like fade away. And, we started to get into like, other programming, like the Aaron Spelling peak happened and then faded away. And then I was in high school and getting ready for college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was going to follow in the steps of my brother.
Okay.
And he had gone for like business and marketing and everything. So I went to a junior college for that. And I did well because I wanted to best my brother, basically. But then it became time like, do you want to go on to like a 4-year college? And my mother was like, you love writing, you've always written. Why don't you look at journalism? And I had always wanted to do that, but it's such a low paying career.
Yeah, I don't know what it was then. I feel like
it was
better
great.
than it was now.
Yeah. And it was bad. So I said, I was like, I just don't think, like, I didn't think you'd want me to. Like, I'm not going to make any money. My mom was like, if it's going to be something you want to do for the rest of your life, might as well. So then I applied for, to journalism school at Temple University. And while I was there, Fox became a thing. Fox had like, I guess near the end of my high school, like into, these early years of the late 80s, early 90s, Fox happened. And it was this weird channel. It was this new network. It wasn't fully programmed. It wasn't 7 days a week. And all the shows were just like, it was weird. It was almost like when people, I think, watch like Lifetime or Hallmark movies, and you're like, it looks like normal TV,
Right.
And it looks like actors that we know, but they're not exactly actors we know. That's what the Fox network was at that time. Like, they look like TV shows that are general comedies, but they're a little off. And the cast is like, where are these people from? And so they had these, weird starts like 21 Jump Street and Booker and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I was like a freshman at Temple when 90210 premiered.
Okay.
And I was managing a video store, a mom and pop video store. And it was, I want to say it was like either a Sunday night or a Wednesday night. I should know this, but I was the only person in the store. Nobody came in. And I watched the 2-hour premiere. And I was captivated because in my like teen years, which had just ended, there had never been a show like this. There'd never been a show that spoke to the teenagers this way.
Right.
We
but
either
that's
had
what I find really interesting about you when you brought this up, because you were already kind of edging out of your teenage years and you still wanted to watch it. And I find that really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm also like, I'm part of that Gen X generation of like kind of Arrested Development of, like we were a little stunted, but there was no like, there was after school specials and that was it. Like we went from, these after school specials, these like, or that HBO show, the True Life Stories or something.
Oh,
I remember like Ben Affleck did one. And it was like a series that they were basically like more adult after school specials. But we never had like a serialized teen drama that really was anything other than like Beverly Hills Teens, So the cartoon. So this was just like fascinating to me. And the first episode is a very interesting storyline. Like it's
Yeah.
about a girl that like Brandon, Brenda and Brandon, they come to, and he gets caught up in this lie, making this school think that this girl, which is so ahead of its time, and I was like, ooh, this is juicy. And like the way they spoke to, Kelly slut shaming her.
Right.
Like they reduced her, and like it was so interesting because that character was created to be the reflection of how harmful that was. And I'm watching that, I was like, oh, she's not just like the typical bad girl. Like she's hurt by all of this and this
Hmm.
reputation that she signed up for originally and then got it. So I was just like fascinated by this. And also, I will always say this, like I find Shannon Doherty on screen to be one of the most captivating actors. There's always something, there's an edge to her, there's a volatility to
Mm.
her, and there's like this something that not a lot of actresses or actors really have, where you almost don't feel safe around her, you
Oh, that's
know,
an interesting way of putting it.
but in 90210, she was getting to play opposite that.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, I mean, I think my memory of when that show premiered, I'm a little younger than you, so I was younger than when it premiered, and my memory of that was watching like the commercials for it, thinking she was going to play the bad girl. And I
Right,
don't, and I this is going to sound insane, but I remember thinking that as a child, being like, oh, the brown hair girl is always the bad girl because it
exactly.
was the
Ex-
stereotyping of
Yep,
back in the day. And
yep.
I'll be honest, I didn't really watch it from the beginning because my parents wouldn't let me. I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
get into it until like season 3 when I was a little bit older, but I was also a little bit, that was my, like season 3 was like 92, 93.
90, it was like, I feel like it was like the show premiered in 90, but
Right.
like then it was like had that weird, remember
Math.
the seasons, they had that like extra season and
That's
then
right.
the summer season, and also their season, like season 3, which is the episode that that
And you
really
want to talk about. Yeah,
set
yeah,
me up.
yeah.
That was like one of 29 episodes
No,
in the first
totally.
season. Like these kids, like
It
like
was,
we were
they
listening,
worked.
yeah, they worked and they were children,
But I also just
And-
mean in the sense of like I was at the age where I actually wanted to watch teen
oh
content
right,
at
right,
that time, like whatever year that was, 92, 93. I like the way that you liked it, even though you were edging out of your teens. Like I had a very small window where I was willing to watch teenagers. I don't like teenagers and
okay,
I don't like content for them a lot of the time. So there's a lot of times where I'll give something a try. I talked about this in an earlier episode. Like I didn't watch Dawson's Creek when it was on because I didn't care because I
interesting,
was a teenager and was like, no, thank
okay,
you.
right.
With this one, I was like on the right age for a certain part of it. It's
But
very bizarre.
but you were at that certain age where your parents might be like, no, that's too mature for
Yeah.
you to watch. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think maybe, they also just, they didn't let me watch a lot of things for a lot of different reasons. But so when you said like 90210, I was like, oh no, am I going to have to watch the whole series to catch up? And then you were
oh my
like,
God.
well, I want to talk about this part
Yeah,
of
this
Brenda.
one
And I was like,
defining
oh, great.
moment.
I know that. I could talk about that. I will rewatch some of it because it's fun. But I also was like, that's so fascinating that like we had totally different experiences and both liked that same part of the story
Mhm.
for, I'm assuming, very different
Yeah, yeah.
reasons.
So that was the thing. Like, I was so fascinated by Shannon Doherty playing this good girl and being like the innocent, and then that big episode at the end of the first season where she and Dylan go to the prom. She loses her virginity, and
Yep.
that was like a very big deal. Meanwhile, here I am, like older, and I was like,
Mhm.
but watching the fan reaction, and I guess this was like my early stages of being in tune with how fans are reacting to programming, how people reacted to it.
Mm.
But then,
Wait, can I
as they
ask, how did you figure that out? Because this was, again, 1990, 1991. Like, we didn't have the internet the way that we did now. So,
no,
like, what did
no.
you do to figure out the fan reaction?
So right, like that was like this is so at the time, because I was so obsessed with the show, I would buy TV Guide magazine.
That makes sense.
So we weren't a TV Guide magazine family. We got like the TV Weekly insert, but I would see the TV Guide always had an ad for that week's episode, which was 3 weeks in advance because their publishing date,
Mm.
and they always knew what the storyline was. And I was like, oh my God. And we would see like reader letters and cheers and jeers, or like the hits and misses and all those reaction things. So that's where, and then of course, I guess it was like early internet situation where
Mm.
like the I Hate Brenda fanzine So,
Oh,
which you don't know
I didn't
about.
have the internet
Yeah.
back then, so I
So,
missed all of.
so there was
I've
like
heard people
AOL
talk
chat
about it.
rooms
I
and all
just
this,
didn't.
and there was this uprise of like people hating on Brenda Walsh, and they started the I Hate Brenda Walsh
Yeah.
fanzine, and then there was like a full like a cassette of different bands playing songs about Brenda Walsh, and
Yes, that I
so it was
remember.
like it became this crazy phenomenon. Like Luke Perry and Jason Priestley did the cover of Vanity Fair, like this was
Hmm.
a thing. So you're seeing how people responded to this, and I was so fascinated by it, but I was always like watching and waiting for them to let her kind of unleash,
Mm,
and we would see hints of it where she would be, like we were seeing a little bit off camera where
sure.
she was like being, she was in the tabloids and things like that. But by
Yeah.
season 3, when they had their really long summer season, and which is one of my favorite things, is if you go back and watch these things, it was clearly like they're doing the storyline arc only for 6 episodes. They brought in a character. It was like Alexandra somebody. She used to be on Daytime, and then she ended up, because all these shows were
Oh
inspired by.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and she was Brooke, who um, worked with Brandon at the beach club. And all summer long, you're like, oh, she's great. She's this great girlfriend, and she works with him, and she'll like, hopefully she'll carry on into the season. And like by the end of the summer episodes, they like suddenly revealed her to be like super racist. And like
Yeah,
just
get
like
rid of her.
entire episode where she just kept dropping anti-Semitic slurs and like racial slurs, and you're like, what is happening? And you're like, oh, she only signed a contract for 6 episodes.
Yeah, you liked her
Yeah,
too much. Now you're gonna hate her. So that when she leaves,
right.
you're not sad.
Yeah. And then what they ran into, which is what every teen soap that, I would say was begotten by
Mm,
90210 has run into, is that they have their central couple, and then fans and the writers and the show start to realize we have a dynamic in this series, in this cast, of a love triangle. Let's mix it up.
yeah.
And they did what I consider like the ultimate sin, which paid off for them, was having it be her best friend.
Hmm.
Like the
I thought
friend.
you were gonna say the ultimate sin for TV, and like,
No,
so
no, no.
I was like,
The
oh, just in
ultimate,
general. Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
no, the ultimate sin of having the best friend fall in love with the boyfriend while she's not there.
Right.
Um, because they could have just introduced like the cousin or something like that.
I guess I do feel like people are gonna yell. Because she was not there and she was having her own experiences with guys who were not Dylan, I do feel like they tried to
Oh,
smooth that, even that a little bit.
100%.
But I agree with you in that, like, it's not the same. Like, this is your best friend. Even if Dylan is going to try something, your best
Right.
friend should be shutting it down.
Like exactly. And so like because they'd already put into position a couple characters that would have worked. Like they'd had that surf
Yeah.
buddy character. That like he had rescued her
I
a
want
couple
to keep
times.
all these people around.
They could have just brought her in
I know.
for that
I know.
arc of him cheating on her.
Yeah.
But to change the full dynamic of the show, and to see that Jenny Garth and Luke Perry
Mhm.
really had this heat on screen, like
Mhm.
their scene in the pool. I want to say it's like the top of the Standard Hotel in LA, because they have that rooftop pool. They have this scene.
I would not have recognized it. I'll say that. I mean,
Oh,
I know they shot. I mean, I thought they used to shoot more in the valley, but I would
yeah,
not have recognized it. I'll say that.
yeah. I think for like their bigger like exterior stuff, like you weren't gonna find a rooftop pool
That's
on a
fair.
high rise, yeah. Uh, and it was like this scene where you're like, there's such sexual tension between these two, and for the viewers, like especially the older ones, were like, well, they're clearly in their 20s. Like these are not high school seniors. These people, these people have
Right.
voted in several elections already. So to do that and then to have the betrayal, and then not just that, but to keep the secret, because it happened during the summer season where Brenda and Donna were off in fake Paris with Dean Cain. And then to play that secret out and even have the girls get to a point where they had already given Dylan the ultimatum, you have to choose one of us. But there's still the secret that he's already been with one.
Right. And
You
then he
know?
like teases it out, which is
Oh
such a
yeah,
TV thing, which is like, I was with a girl to see how she will feel, but then
exactly.
doesn't say the whole story
Right.
just yet.
Which is such a guy thing. Like that was such a guy move where I was like, I give them credit for thinking that far ahead. Like he was a bit of a coward.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But a lot of his existence was really linked to acceptance by the Welshes. Yeah. So the scene in season three, ah, it was just because you know
You're
they didn't
talking,
plan
wait,
anything.
you have, I want to set this up for people who
Okay,
I'm not going to send the YouTube
right.
clip to or the actual episode to. So you're talking about the scene where they finally tell her
They
and
finally
it
tell
kind
her.
of sets off this new
Yes,
Brenda.
it flips everything on its head because they've gotten, and this is also they're really masterful. They've already laid like they have big storylines going on. Steve has already gotten the legacy key that is going to change the course of his college career because it's going to get him
Oh,
completely,
Steve.
um,
I'm sorry. I didn't really
Andrea,
care about Steve. No offense.
Andrea, Andrea has been run down by the car that's part of a racing group,
Right.
the car racing group. Um, Gil, the teacher, is being accused of sexual misconduct.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, he's the teacher that I always thought Andrea was going to get with.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then you've got because we're also in the cusp of Brandon is with that girl Nikki.
Yeah, it was what episode? It was like the mid. You said it before, where it was like there were like 29 episodes in that
Yeah,
season. This was like the
it was.
middle of
I
that
want
season
to say, let's see,
because the
it
episode
was
was called "Back in the High Life Again."
right, and it was so, and it was episode 19 of the
Right.
third
Okay.
season,
So a little bit
93.
beyond the middle.
Yeah, and it was they'd already had a really long Christmas break, and you know, Dylan's father has just been released from
Hmm.
prison, which sets up an entire other thing. So we've got all of that. And then we get to this point where they're like, we have to reveal this.
Right.
And oh my God. Like Brenda is already suspecting like something's up. He's been distant. And then it all hinges on his father comes home. He's having this like welcome back thing, and none of the friends go except for Kelly. And that's a big deal. Like Dylan feels very betrayed by all of his friends. He even has a scene in this episode where like he gives shit to like Brandon and
Hmm.
Steve. And Steve like is again like Steve was like the golden retriever of the group.
Right. Right.
The fact that Dylan was so mad even at Steve,
Hmm.
Brenda wasn't there because the father wasn't allowing them, and Kelly, so Kelly was there, and it was like the pump was primed for this moment. And then her saying, "We have to tell her." Is like that's where the friends should have been doing this 3 months ago.
Yeah. Exactly. But now it's serious, and she's back, and
Yeah,
better late than never,
and
maybe.
it's like an organized hit. Like they show up at the door of the Walsh house together, which immediately, like anyone who's been in this position knows.
Yeah, I was gonna say that always, that I don't know that I really internalized this then when I was watching it younger, but then to see it through the years in clips or in reruns or whatever, that to me always really stood out because on the one hand, I felt like, okay, they're supporting each other through this. Who's supporting Brenda?
Right,
They're ganging up on Brenda.
right. And well, Dylan has the scene right before it where he tells Brandon, "Watch out for
Yes,
your sister. She's going to need it."
but
But
Brandon's not in the scene.
and remember also, there are no cell phones really at this point.
Yeah.
Like those were not like a normal thing. So they couldn't even call and say like, "Hey, meet me at the park" or whatever. They have to go to the house. It's all very analog. She goes and gets her coat. They've got the great shot of her like getting the coat and realizing like this is where it happens. It's like when Drea De Matteo's character in The Sopranos realizes that she's about to be whacked.
Yeah.
And then when they go on remote, like that they shot it outside,
On a street, walking down
but
the
it's
street.
so again, what is it?
What'd you say?
What street?
Oh, I don't know what street. I
Oh,
just said
okay. I
they're
thought you knew
walking
what
down
street
the
it was,
street. Could
'cause
you
I will
imagine if I knew that? That would be
I
amazing.
will go to that scene. And they walk her out, but it's so smart because when you're doing something like this, you want to do it in public because
Mm,
if something goes south, you don't want it in the house. You don't
yeah.
want, like they might be more inclined to not lose their shit if it's in public.
I mean, it's interesting that you say that because normally I would agree, but they're just on an empty street. They're not in a restaurant.
Right, right, that's true.
So,
But they're in a
she
park.
does get pretty loud.
I feel like
They're
I
outside.
think it's a park.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
I don't even know what their surroundings
yeah.
were.
I feel
There's
like it's a
always that like
park.
long shot in the beginning, and half pay attention to what's around them. But either way, I mean, they're outside, so she does
Yeah.
get pretty loud. That's one thing I did always remember about, like, she stood up for herself. She yelled
Oh
at them.
yeah. Oh
That was
yeah. And but
great.
it's like you look at like even the styling.
Mm,
You know, like Brenda is in a leather jacket. She's in dark boots. Like she's in almost armor with these two. And Dylan's wearing this very light, like the beige jacket
mm.
and like a plaid light blue thing where it's like it's no longer like he's no longer like the bad boy. You know, it's almost like he's been domesticated and he's softer. And Kelly just has this stricken look on her face that is just like she's operating on pure fear. I love this scene so much.
Yeah. I will say though, what you just pointed out to me is also a very interesting thing the show did, because you said armor. I looked at what they put her in and said, oh, they look like they're trying to villainize her. Like they're trying to make her the heavy one. She's yelling at them. The audience will turn on her because they want them to root. They want to root for Dylan and Kelly. And I'm like, that's an unfair thing. I think if it's an intentional subliminal message for the show to do to that character.
Interesting. Interesting
But
how we both read it
I
differently.
know. And
Yeah.
again, maybe it's because we watched it for the first time at different places or we identified with different characters. I also have learned recently that sometimes I just am like reading my own things into it based on what I want it to be. And
And maybe that's what I'm projecting
well, I
too.
feel bad for Brenda in this moment. So I'm like, why are you trying to force us to like this new couple? So I don't
Interesting.
know. I don't know.
Yeah, I saw it as like her, that was her armor. And because the next episode, they pretty much devote to like the, and they play some of it for comedy of how much she's hurting from this.
Right.
You know, but it is, you know, there's, so this, they tell her, she puts it together. And when she asks if they slept together, and Kelly immediately says no, and he says no, the look she gives Luke Perry,
Hmm.
there's like a flint in her eyes, it's like tears, but also there's this rage. And I always say, like, I even told Shannon Doherty this because I when they did like the revival
Oh, yeah,
reality
yeah.
thing, I told her, I was like, that was the beginning of the Brenda Walsh like villain origin story. You know, like that's where she was so broken that it changed her personality.
But that's what I was just saying. Like that to me, that's why I felt like they were
Oh,
trying
but
to
it does.
villainize
It
her in
takes
that
a
scene.
while for
Yeah.
her to get it. It
Oh
takes
no,
her
I
a while.
know.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
also felt like they were trying to say, like, you're gonna root for this couple, you're not gonna root for her. And listen, one of my favorite things is watching women be angry on TV. So I again was more interested in Brenda's storyline after this moment
Yeah.
than the
Well,
Kelly and
but
Dylan
back then,
romance.
like villain, I guess is probably too tough because the show never really had a
No,
true
I mean
villain
it's too binary for
until
like how
Gina
we
showed
watch
up.
it.
Yeah, but it was like this was where we got like Dark Brenda,
Yeah.
and so that when she looks at him, and but it's so interesting because there was we know now that there was tension on set, there was conflict going on, and when she says, "Why are you doing this to me?" Listen to how, because it's shot from behind
Mm,
and it's Luke Perry, and he says, because we owe it to you. But the way he says it almost feels vindictive.
interesting.
And it's an interesting thing. Like the way he says it almost is like, because you deserve it.
Yeah.
It's
Huh.
really weird because in the prior episode, in the scene where she said, like they say, we deserve to tell the truth, like
Right.
she deserves to be told the truth. But the way Luke Perry presents it, it's almost like
Mm,
they're sticking it to her.
mm-hmm.
Kelly doesn't go that route, and then that's when she lets the big gun out. It was I hate you both, never talk to me again, and that was like that is the Luke, I'm your father, like where everything changes because from that moment on, Brenda Walsh is a totally different character. She starts making choices and decisions that are based purely in her own self, like survival.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is what inspires her to like consider leaving town,
Right.
going to college out of town. You know, all that stuff. You even start to see like her makeup, her hair, her styling is very different.
Yes.
And I know that Shannon Doherty at the time also started to take a little bit more agency
Control.
in how she wanted this character presented.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also a really good point, just in the sense of like, there was so much of her early storyline that was really around Dylan. And
Mm,
I mean, again, my memory might be a little flawed of the earlier pieces, but I do think there were moments where they would try to show she has other things going
yeah.
on, but I don't think it was ever to the degree. And I always wondered, and I'm not asking you to tell me because I don't even know if you know, but I always wondered how much of that was maybe they really realize like, oh, we have to do something else with her because if she's not in this relationship,
Right.
what are we going to see her do? Like that forced them to actually make her a well-rounded character. And I don't
And
think it
it's
should
almost
take you that long, but
right.
it seems
Well, it's
like
almost
that's
like
what
it
they
was
took.
like an accidental side effect
Yeah.
of like, okay, well, if they're not going to like some of the actors were having problems with her, so like she couldn't be in part like certain scenes. But what happened was because of this breakup and this deception and the kind of like the alliances, like that like her friends were still
Mm.
loyal to them, but also
Mhm.
they love her. What it ended up happening with because now at this point Doherty is like not exactly on the outs, but it's clear like she'll be leaving soon.
Right.
What happens is the Brenda Walsh character, and this is what got me so. I was like, I want to write about this show. I want to write about the show. I want to
Mm.
cover the show. I want to write was for the next season and a half. Brenda Walsh is almost disconnected.
Yeah.
She is like adrift.
Yeah.
She no longer has her crew. She no longer has this identity that she was hinged to, which was Dylan. They do a couple back and forths, but it was interesting because it was so reflective of so many people now at that age that I knew
Mhm.
who were searching. We were in college, we were separated from our friends and family for long periods of time, and we were finding out who we were, and we
Mhm.
were searching for ourselves. And it was like, this was the age where people start to detach from their high school friends
Yeah.
and make more adult friends, or they get a career, they get, and so I was seeing that in Brenda, where she was lonelier. She was a little more, not nihilistic, but she was, she was so much more relatable. She
Yeah.
was so much more relatable because she had had, of anyone, something really horrible.
Yeah. I will say I don't want to speak for Shannon's experience, but I would say I think it's both Shannon was relatable and Brenda was relatable because I think like sending Brenda off to Minnesota is like a punishment in a way
Right,
to Shannon
exactly.
because when they bring Brenda back, it's like, well, you couldn't hack it at that college, so like we don't think you can hack it here. I'm like, that's a horrible thing to say about somebody
Yeah,
you love.
yeah. Right, exactly. And this is a character that you gave us and told us to love.
Right,
And they're
right.
chipping away at her. But because, and it probably was a reflection of what Doherty was going through on set,
Hmm.
where she probably felt very isolated, very
Yeah.
detached. And that came through. And I would watch every week and I was like, I don't think we're going to be able to save her. I
Mm.
think she needs to leave town.
But again, I like that you were thinking that because I think so many of my friends that were watching the show were really buying the shaping that they were giving them and the
Right.
follow Kelly and Dylan, we like them. Brenda's the villain. Don't
Right,
like her.
exactly, right. Whereas I was always like, eventually this Kelly Dillon thing is going to fall
Oh yeah.
apart because it's unsustainable,
Yeah. It's high
and
school romance.
high school romance, and each season with like a different cast changing, like Shannon leaves and then Luke leaves, and you're like, well, then they're clearly going to have to put, Brandon and Kelly together, which was,
I mean, I'm going to say this, even if they didn't leave, I think they would have had to try that anyway, just
right,
because of
right,
the
go through those
ensemble.
permutations, right,
Yes.
right. But it was so interesting they never did it with Donna.
Did you want
Donna
them
had
to
a
do it
series of
with,
boyfriends.
I know, but did you want that? I didn't want that.
But no, like, see, 'cause, like Donna had a series of guest star boyfriends,
Yeah,
right? But she always went back to David, but she never
I
crossed
know.
that line with Dylan or Brandon
I'm going to say this as
or
somebody
Steve.
who is, cynical about the way that TV does anything, but certainly cynical about the way that they do ensemble shows. It always felt to me like they didn't take Donna seriously. And which is interesting to me because
Right,
sometimes when you don't take those characters seriously, they're the ones that are in the more stable relationships because it's like we don't need to worry about giving them story or a story, not let alone C story
of
every
course.
week. So because of that, I was like, it makes sense. Like what they
Yeah.
did, she kind of keeps coming back to David, but like it's fine for her to explore with people I don't need to get invested in. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Even when she popped with the Donna Martin graduates situation, they
sure.
still didn't give her anything beyond that except a 7 seasons more of I'm a Virgin.
Well, I mean, I think that was more her dad's influence, wasn't it? Like
Probably,
we want
probably,
her to be, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But it became a point where like you're like the show ran so long, you're like these children
Mhm.
these children are 30 now.
Adults. Yeah, they're not children anymore.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. But it's interesting. You're right. And because David got storylines, like
Yeah.
there were like 2 episodes where he was a meth addict.
Sometimes.
Yeah, because he was like doing the radio show.
But that's what I'm saying.
Um,
Like even that, like it's contained.
yeah,
It's something
yeah,
that's like we're gonna do it for a little while. Maybe we had a mandate about like we need to do a dare episode, like don't do drugs
right.
episode or whatever. And it's not something that really affected the wider dynamics in a long-term way. I
And
felt
it's
like they
interesting, right? They never really did like a themed, overreaching arc. Like even when like those early seasons where Brenda, had found a lump in her breast during SATs,
I
you
forgot
know,
about
like
that.
that was like that could have been a thing,
Yeah.
you know, but it was resolved in an episode. Kelly's diet pill thing,
Right. Well, I
you know,
mean, those are
right,
all of the time that felt very
right.
like
But
special
then like
episode, move on.
right, but her storyline with Colin later on, the
Mm.
artist who was like the drug addict, like that was, but it was never affecting, like even like Kelly when she was in the cult, David doing his meth for 2 weeks. Steve did steroids for one episode. Yeah,
Yeah.
but they never did like even like the Walsh parents.
Yeah.
It would have been very interesting if they'd actually played out like them separating.
That's true. I mean, I don't know how many young audience members cared to watch the parents. That's a conversation I've always had, like especially with the CW shows more recently. But I always got the feeling that a lot of it too is like these more serious issues beyond it would change the heaviness of the show if they
Right,
went on too long. I think also it would change how you feel about like these core characters are supposed to all mostly be good kids. And if
yes, you're right.
suddenly you gave them a long-term addiction, at the time people weren't nice about addiction. They weren't
Right,
saying
even
this is a disease. They
Dylan's
were saying you're a
alcoholism.
villain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Dylan's alcoholism was like touched on. We were, and then, but then when he came back,
Yeah.
that was the weirdest thing. He came back when Luke Perry came back to the show. Dylan was drinking,
Well,
and they
maybe
never
they wanted to
addressed
say
it.
he wasn't, quote, an
Yeah,
alcoholic,
right,
which
right.
I
But
think
he
is a
did.
problem. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
But
No, I
that's what I
found it
mean. It's
really
like they
disturbing.
wanted you to love this guy. Maybe they forgot, to be honest with you. Do you
Honestly,
think? I
yeah.
think
But I
maybe
was
they
so
forgot.
disturbed by that because I was like, that's a very important character trait that like in the
Yeah.
same way that Kelly had a severe eating disorder at one point, like they did acknowledge that was something later on. But yeah, it was always something fascinating to me that like these actors would come back and they would have different writers. And
Yes.
I guess then like actors really didn't get to have a say in how their characters were presented.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
don't, I mean,
it
who
was
knows if they, I mean, some of them might have wanted it. I don't
right,
know.
right. Yeah, but you're right. They were all good kids who always hung out with bad kids.
I mean, but that's true. I think that's true. I think kids,
Yeah,
like most kids have that, like as we're figuring out who we are, we're hanging out with different crowds and sometimes it sticks and sometimes it
yeah,
doesn't. And on a
yeah.
show like this, like, well, it can't stick. You're hanging, the Peach Pit is it's almost as wholesome as the Riverdale in the comics, not the show. So it's like you can't go too far beyond a certain.
Right, right. And again, right, this was an 8 o'clock show.
Yes, that's true
Yeah,
too.
right.
Yeah, I
And
forgot it
so,
was 8 o'clock.
yeah, so this was also at the time, they were also kind of gearing up for the spinoff, the
Mm,
Melrose Place spinoff. So we're about a season away from that. And this was also like, so where I was getting through college, I guess, they launched the spinoff just as I started TV Guide.
oh,
I was
wow.
like, I think I was
That's
like
cool.
2 seasons into Melrose. I should find that out. But like it was also it had already been assigned to writers. Like
Mm,
the writer of 90210 was handling the spinoff. But it was
makes
for
sense.
me, like growing up in the 80s with TV, shows would always have spinoffs, like all the Norman Lear shows, and there were technically like they'd have crossovers. They like special guests, Carol O'Connor, like Golden Girls, and then Empty Nest. But it was never a shared universe,
Hmm.
right? 90210 into Melrose became the first real experience of a shared universe where what happened on one show could impact the other show, especially in the early season, where they did have Donna and Kelly connected with Jake. It was one of those things where, and it was, and I always wanted like when actors left 90210, I always wanted them to like kind of morph over to Melrose Place. Like bring that because
Some of them I don't think would have worked.
it's true. Oh, some of them, but like when they lost like I felt like Valerie Malone,
Oh
like
yeah.
Tiffany Amber Thiesen's character, she would have been
That would have been a
great.
great fit.
Right. Like even like the Gina Kincaid character,
Hmm.
uh, the Brenda, I call her Brenda because she was General Hospital.
Vanessa Marcel.
Vanessa Marcel.
Yeah.
She would have been a great fit. I just loved that idea of them, like they grow up and they get to go on to Melrose Place. I would love that.
Well, maybe in the new Melrose Place that they're talking about, the continuation slash revival slash whatever we call it, maybe that will happen.
Yeah. So Melrose launched in 92. So we'd already they started doing this thing. And that's where this is where I'm like, now I need to get a job. I need to write about these shows that I'm now obsessed with. And it was like 90210 scratched that youth itch, and then Melrose Place gave me these are my grown-ups, these are my peers, these are people that I would see at a bar. But that first season was so bad.
Yeah, but I just also love this because I was also more of a Melrose Place person. But again, I was significantly younger, but I was watching it like, I want to go live in a apartment complex in Los Angeles. I didn't want to have their lives because they were nuts.
In that first season, they were still giving those grown-up characters the storylines that the 90210 characters could have had. Like Billy paying his student loans.
Right.
Like, that's a 90210 problem.
I don't know. I mean, you couldn't have sustained how long Melrose Place went on if those were the only problems. But I do think you have to ease people in. You can't start with Kimberly ripping her hair off and showing the scar.
So this evolution, this is where and then the kids graduated. They went through graduation. They started college, and then that was really where we saw Brenda just drifting off again. She would have been great on Melrose Place also.
That's true, but I feel like at that point, the people who were in production didn't get along with her. It was a close enough, I don't want to say family, but it was a close enough group of people that worked on these shows that I don't think that could have happened.
But it is telling that the way they transfer it, and it gives Shannon Doherty some short shrift because she left almost like a defeated her,
No, totally. And that's the problem is that nobody cared about the character. I don't think a lot of people cared about the actor at the end.
They didn't care about her, and she didn't get a worthy send off. Right. And then after that, everyone that they cast for subsequent seasons, it was always the new bad girl.
Yeah.
I was like, well, Brenda wasn't the bad girl.
Exactly.
We didn't need a new bad girl because we didn't have an old one. And that's how, talk about easing people in, the introduction of Valerie Malone with her smoking in the house.
Well, Brenda, right away, that's a bad girl move.
No, she was right. And meanwhile, the 2 seasons before, Brenda had picked up smoking in Paris. And she had this whole mini storyline of sneaking smokes.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. That was the old school definition of what do villains do? They twirl their mustaches, they smoke, they wear dark clothes. It's something you could never do today because we expect so much more nuance.
Right.
But the fact that they were getting away with it
girls now actually are killing people. They are just Riverdale. And this is the thing. The show. Because remember, so now I'm a TV guide, and we have our annual fall preview, issue. And every season, I swear to God, probably the first 5 years I was at the magazine, there was at least 2 90210 or Melrose-inspired ripoffs.
Well, yeah, because it was popular. Of course they're going to try to copy it.
And none of them stuck.
No.
But some of them were awesome.
Oh, so I was surprised you said that because I was going to be I can't imagine any of them that were that good. They're just ripping off.
Class of 97? Class of 97?
I don't know. I don't know that one.
Oh.
Do I know that one? I feel like I might be confusing that with something else.
No, Class of 97 was set at a college. It was Jason Gedrick, Lisa Dean Ryan, I want to say Kari Wurr was in it. And it was about a freshman class at this kind of academic, New Englandy type of college, and it was really good.
Okay.
It was really, really good. And then you had the Round Table, which was about a bunch of young Washington D.C. up and comers, lobbyists and a cop and a politician's aide and things like that. And it was David Gale, who had been on 90210. Yeah, and so every season there was something. There was freshman dorm. CBS did a freshman dorm, which I want to say Matthew Fox wasn't it?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's funny that you bring all of these up. They're all college. Well, maybe not the round table, but like a lot of them sound college level because
Yeah.
I'm constantly talking about how there are no college shows now. So it's
Yeah.
interesting to see how then there was a group of them for a while. Again, you said they didn't really work, and maybe that's why it's taken so long to get back to that place because we've had a
Right.
few sprinkled here and
Well,
there, but nothing
we got One
stuck.
Tree Hill.
Sure,
You know,
but that was
One Tree
also
Hill,
how
which
many years
stuck.
ago now?
Right,
And that was,
when One Tree Hill was like the 90210, like this is our
yeah,
90210. It stuck, right? But when they got
right.
to college, they jumped over it.
That okay, yeah, that's true. I mean, I think there is, I do think there is a slight fear of like, will our college storylines be too much like our high school storylines?
Right, right.
But if you have an opportunity to start a show, you could
Mhm.
start it in college instead of high school.
It feels like any show that I could recall right now that was set in college has some supernatural angle to it.
Recently?
The Magicians, The
Oh,
Society,
the
um,
society.
yeah.
Forgot.
Like
I
all those
didn't.
college, like they all have some sort of like Gen
Yeah.
B.
Yeah. I mean, well, because there was Dear White People for a little while,
Oh, so
which I
good.
loved. But
So
like
good.
again, that's how this conversation started. Not to go on a tangent, but I was working on trying to get a trend story in when I was at Variety about college shows and like why it's so hard to get them greenlit or staying on longer. And like that was an example of like, well, there's IP here because it was a movie first.
Right.
And so we also dealt with Grownish because it was like, again, there's IP here because Blackish, but then it was like nothing else.
Yeah.
And I was like, I
Yeah.
can't really. I think we ended up finding a way to do a trend story, but I can't remember what the third thing was to make it the trend at this
Yeah.
point. But it was like pulling teeth. It was like, well,
Yeah.
literally, do you have anything in development that we could talk about? Because like you're kind of making our point for us by saying no, but also why?
Why not? Right.
What's the
Like those are
problem
the
here?
right. That's the age range. That's the demo.
You think, yeah. I mean, and that was the whole thing came about because I was working with somebody who she started as an intern, then she became a freelancer for me, and she was like, "There's a deficit here. Me and my friends and I like we'll watch some of the older shows, but we don't really relate to them because the times with all the things that we just talked about, you know."
Yeah, I guess really like the Magicians.
Yeah, but again, you're right. Like that's not really about college.
Right. It was just set in college. Right.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
nobody wants to see us like when you're in college, you're either in class or you're like,
Are you? I wasn't.
oh, I know, neither was I.
Anyway.
Uh, but like, does somebody want to watch that show of what I was doing when I wasn't in school? Like, we have
Yes.
Euphoria.
Exactly. Well, again, but like
Yeah,
Euphoria to me being set in high school,
right.
crazy town. That should have been
Absurd.
set in college, but whatever.
But like
Um,
that's also like I have friends with kids now that are of that high school age.
mm,
And honestly, some of the stories they tell me are horrifying.
yeah.
Like when 90210 was on and it was scandalous that the kids went to a rave and they had to turn in an egg and Emily Valentine got, Brandon to take Euphoria. That was like, oh my God, this could happen. Like now I hear stuff about these like real life kids and what they're into. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, but the thing is, you don't have to be scandalous to tell a college story. I don't know. I don't want to go on a like
Buffy, yeah,
completely derailment. It
Buffy
just
did a good
bugs me.
college arc. Buffy did a good college arc.
Sure, but again, how many
Yeah.
years ago?
And again, another supernatural angle.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't,
Right.
but
What
I
is, yeah.
mean, not that we're not going to talk about supernatural shows because I know what you wanted to talk about for modern times have those elements.
Yeah.
There were a few things that you said a few minutes ago where I was like, oh, this would be a good segue into the now pop culture. I've already like lost the thread in my head of how I was going to segue. So I'm not going to segue. I'm going to make you set it up again.
Okay. All right. So I still love my high school and teen dramas. I
Yes.
love them. I think Outer Banks is hilarious. Like, first of all, not filmed in Outer Banks. Like I loved, Deadly Class. I love, Summer I Turned Pretty and, all those. They're super fun. They're sweet. Heartbreaker. Oh my God. Oh my God. But as I've gotten older, so have some of my TV tastes, and I started to watch like some grown-up shows. Uh, but I will say this, I am not a prestige drama guy. I am not like Mad Men Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, all fine shows, I bet. I watched a lot of Game of Thrones, enjoyed a lot of it.
Okay.
Everyone looked the same.
I
Literally
mean, yeah,
everyone looked the
they're
same.
not for everybody.
Yeah, it was just a white man with a beard. I had to keep Googling who these people were.
Yeah, fair.
I do tend to like trashier shows or, like very glamorous shows. Like I'm one of the 8 people who watched the Gossip Girl reboot. Um, but I love a show with beautiful people doing terrible things.
Hmm.
And I also love supernatural stuff. I love gothic. I love a high production value. And when Interview with the Vampire crossed my face, like when it just, I was like, what on God's green earth is this absolute TV fentanyl? Like I was like hooked immediately. I was like, you are gorgeous. You are toxic. You are luscious. Like this show, like, because remember,
Wait,
I'm old.
no, further, you're not old, but wait. It crossed your face as a TV show, but had you already read the book? Had you already seen the
That's the thing.
movie?
So I had read the book, I'd seen the movie,
Okay.
and I knew, like, I thought the movie was good. I knew there was a huge uproar. I found the books as a child, like as a younger reader, very difficult.
Mm,
Like very detailed, very dense, very, not a lot of plot, but
yeah,
a lot of detail.
a lot of detail.
Uh, Returning to the text, I take it as a way different thing. But when I first saw that first episode, I was like, oh my God, they took the gay subtext
Hmm.
and made it pure context. Like they're not like being coy. They're not being like, we're just implying this. They weren't queer baiting. They were like, no, these 2 men are lovers. And the amount of effort they went into, because I know, and people were like kind of pissed about like the race changing of Louis and all that. And I was like,
There's always going to be
well, there's
someone
always
that's
gonna be a
mad.
problem. Right.
There's also going to be someone that's mad that they made that text and not subtext, which is
Exactly. Right.
crazy because I don't know what book you were reading, but
Right,
whatever.
exactly. I mean, even the covers of the original books were like, this is so gay. And the actors are so good. And the recreation of New Orleans in the like, it was just so gorgeous. And it was like an instant hit
Mhm.
of just, I will ride this story into my own grave.
Well, I mean, no, because I can't imagine it's going to last that long. No offense to all of the fans.
So they do have 14 books in the Vampire Chronicles to mine from.
Yes, but if that's one a year, 14 years
But
is not a long
first
life.
first season of Vampire was only the first half of the book.
Oh, I don't
Yeah,
know if I realized.
yeah,
I did not
yeah.
read the book. This is one of
Okay.
the rare
So yeah,
adaptations where I did not read the book.
so first half of the book, which is a beautiful, story, it
Mhm.
really just sets up the very toxic relationship between Louis and
Yeah.
Lestat,
Yeah.
and then adopting Claudia and becoming this very, like, again, an unsustainable family unit, and how much cruelty Lestat exhibits and drives these 2 characters to murder.
Yeah.
The second half of the book is Paris, where they
Okay.
flee America. They have killed their maker, which is the greatest crime in vampire lore.
I know. I
And
also had a hard time because in most vampire shows, if you kill your maker, you also die. So like it
right,
took me a minute to be like, huh?
right.
How?
But here we know, did he really die?
I'm gonna
Because
have to
there's still
assume
the second
no.
half of the book,
I
right?
know.
So, so this second half of the book, season 2, it gives us like one episode. The first episode back is just establishing they're no longer in America. They're in war-torn, Eastern Europe. It is, the first season was glamorous and the costuming was gorgeous and there was parties every night, and now they're like living in dirt and they're avoiding, and it's such an interesting concept. The writing on the show is so beautiful. They're in a country where, because of the war and the rations and the starvation and the Nazism, right?
Mhm.
The blood there is bad. It's such an interesting concept.
Yeah,
But you
especially
can't
on the
really,
backdrop of now. Like
yeah, yeah.
you could, yeah, obviously it's a period piece, but at the same time, it's like, well, how are we watching it and what is going on today? And like, what should we be taking away from the show?
So many like analogies that could be made
Right.
to like, just that internal rot of like anti-Semitism and hatred,
Right.
and how it really just robs you of your soul. And then they fall in, they get to Paris, and they fall in with this group of theater vampires, which is just the juiciest part of the book. It is, but it's also for anyone who reads it, you know that it's going to end horribly for certain
Mm,
characters, and it's like, how are we going to get to this point,
mhm.
and how are you going to make it okay for us? Because you know, if they stay true to it, we have to
Right.
say goodbye to certain characters.
Right, of course. But
Yeah,
that's, I mean, not, it's not exactly what we were talking about with the switch on 90210. Like they make you love a character, but then,
right, right.
they make you hate them before you say goodbye. I don't think that's what they're gonna do here, but I mean, that's, to me, that is the mark of good writing, is that when you can make somebody love them so much, like that's the point when they are saying goodbye, that it hurts that much.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
don't want to be happy to see these
No,
characters
no,
leave.
right. Like don't ruin a character for me just because you're going to get rid of them.
Right.
Like let me mourn them. Let me lose them. Grays has always been good about that.
Mm.
Like when Grays kills a character, they don't like they're not like, "Oh, and by the way, he was like, you know, a philanthropist." You
Yeah.
know, or like he was like philandering and you know, like he had a secret stash of gold. You know, it was always like, "No, he died tragically and this is horrible."
Hmm.
It's the interesting flip is the way they made Lestat so worthy of our derision, so hateful, right? Because he's so cruel, but you miss him.
Yeah.
You
Well,
miss
I
him,
mean, how
you
many
know.
times do you end up loving the quote
The
unquote
villain, right,
villain,
right. The
right?
person we
Like,
love to hate.
yeah.
But it's interesting because they bring in this character Assad, who's the actor is Assad
Yeah.
Zaman, who's playing Armand, and on paper he should be a much better person for Louis.
Who
They've
cares
been
about
together for
paper?
like 70 years, you know,
Right.
like there's tenderness, there's like honesty, blah blah blah. But there's still part of you that like
Yeah.
you're like, can I ship this?
Right.
And
And I
that's
mean,
how the writing is so good.
right, because it's also, if you're watching it and you're not just watching it and turning it off and not thinking about it anymore, like theoretically you are then thinking about, like, if I'm shipping this couple versus this couple, what does that say about what I'm looking for in relationships?
Oh
And like,
yeah.
should I be in therapy? Like,
Right. Do I love a
does,
problematic vampire or should I
yeah,
be
does
right?
this explain a lot about me? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, that's part of why I did this whole, like, let's talk about the childhood part of this conversation first, is because I think so much of that, when you're younger, you are just watching something and you're not thinking as deeply because you don't know how to yet.
Right.
And so then it shapes who you are. And then you watch this later show where you're starting to realize, oh, wait a minute,
Well,
real
and
or
it's
fake
interesting.
a relationship? Was I shaped by a toxic
Well,
relationship?
it's interesting that you actually tying it to childhood in the same way, like the first half was about, you know, the
Yeah.
before. Around that time, probably 2 or 3 years before I just like 90210, I probably read Interview with the Vampire in high school.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
high school age, probably read it then. And the presentation of that was like a very like gay coded
Yeah.
story for a closeted kid that was like, but it was also a presentation of like, this is what relationships are like.
Mm.
Men. Like they're violent, they're abusive, they're, you know, you're always withholding, they're punitive, all of this. And then, so that was my first take on it. And then I saw the movie, which really presents like there's no romance between Tom Cruise's
Yeah.
character and Brad
Right.
Pitt's. Like there's just it's never played for that. Tom Cruise is definitely playing like a bitch, but you know, there's nothing queer coded there really.
Right.
More so maybe when they do get to Paris and we get to like um Antonio Banderas.
Hmm.
Because I think everyone would be gay for Antonio Banderas. So to see now as a grown adult who has processed through, you know,
Yeah.
various relationships and my I know what a relationship should look like. Um, to now see a faithful adaptation and representation of what Anne Rice was writing and
Right.
what that relationship is, and to be able to say this is a toxic relationship.
Right.
These two people should not be together. Yet because of the entertainment value, I'm like, but they need to be together because I need more of that storyline.
But
You
it's also,
know?
I mean, I think it's also interesting the way that you framed it, is like when you were reading it and you were in this environment of, I'm not out yet. I
Right.
don't know what these relationships would be in my life or in general, to then read it that way, read how violent and like not healthy it is. if there's an internalization of that, like what that must do if you don't have better examples
You don't
somewhere
have it
else.
right. There were no examples until,
Yeah.
like even 90210, like
Yeah.
they had, like I can't even remember.
I don't think so, but I mean, I didn't watch every single episode,
They
so
had like every special, like
right.
basically special category, but
But maybe not a
man,
gay
gay
character.
character.
I want to say, I can't
Melrose
say
did,
definitively. I can't because like I
right?
said, I didn't see every single episode.
Melrose had Matt and then his various partners.
Yeah.
But I don't like they didn't. I didn't think they had like a very special episode of like
I think there might have been like one where it was like a question, but again, it's like coded. It's like subtext. It's like maybe
right,
this person is or isn't. We're not going to talk about it. Maybe it's also just like the actor's playing it a certain way and it wasn't intentional. Who knows?
right,
But but that's what I'm saying. Like today, if not you, but like if the universal you, if there's a kid out there watching Interview with the Vampire struggling with sexuality, I think there is more available in terms of resources of like this relationship looks sort of like what I think a relationship would be, but like I can acknowledge that it's not healthy. And should I ship it or should I go somewhere else? Like I
right,
think that is
exactly.
it's not your we talk a lot about like if it's the only thing representing something, then it has to be
True.
everything. And like that doesn't work and it
And it
shouldn't
does
work
not
for
work.
these
No,
reasons.
no,
Because if
right.
you
We
like
need multiple versions, right?
yeah,
And I'm
you
looking
want to
at
have a layered, violent relationship, but it can't be the only one you see, or you're going to think that's
so
what it's supposed to be, or that person doesn't support it, and that's why they're shaping it that way.
Steve Sanders' frat brother
I don't remember him.
was gay, and Steve accidentally outed him.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to that actor. I don't remember that.
We didn't even get a gay character in Los
Oh, that's
Angeles.
the other thing. It's not even until the college years. It's later in the show, so it's like
Right,
mid to late
right.
90s.
We already had like alcoholic characters. We had the black neighbors for a week. We had the cousin who was in a wheelchair. We had like we had all of like everything but a gay character.
That's yeah,
Yeah. We had Matthew Perry as the suicidal tennis player.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. And now it's almost like, oh, you're gay? How quaint. Yeah.
Well, but because it should be, it shouldn't be like
Yeah.
I
No,
don't
I
feel
love
like.
it.
Listen, I don't know your experience. I don't want to ever tell somebody what it should be, but I don't feel like you should feel like you have to come out,
Oh,
make a big statement. You
right.
just be who you are. And if you
Exactly.
want to tell, if you want to
I
come out,
love a show.
great.
I love a show that's just like that's the character.
Yeah.
Like and I feel like Pretty Little Liars was
Mhm.
really the first time
The
uh,
original.
the
Yeah,
original
yeah, yeah.
um, did that with a character where they didn't have like a very special coming out episode.
Mhm.
They didn't have anything. It was just like, oh, Emily's into girls, and the girls were like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. Nothing else.
Yeah.
No big deal. No episode where they're like, Emily can't be on the swim team because she's a lesbian. Nothing.
I
You
mean,
know.
you should never do that, but
But,
I mean,
but
I
again,
say that, but then I'm also like very aware that that's still happening. So then I'm like, we kind of do in certain situations need to shine a light on it to show why it's a
yeah,
problem.
yeah.
Like I love We're Here and I have
Oh yeah.
so many, I just watch every episode like tense. Like, why do
Oh,
these people live in these communities that don't support them? Like, get them all out, like leave.
exactly. I mean, I
But
get it. Like sometimes you can't afford it, or like you have no other place
absolutely.
to go. Right. But it's also like it's so funny because I watched that as well because again, like coming up, Queer Eye, the original,
Mhm.
that was the first time, even before probably Will and Grace, where people were like, "Oh, gays are kind of fun and magical."
Well, yeah, because they
And
were real. Will and
right,
Grace, everybody knew Eric was straight playing a gay actor.
right,
Sean, I believe, was still closeted
yes,
playing a gay
yeah.
character. Like,
And then like every straight actor, name actor who went and guest starred
yeah,
on it was like so brave. Like, oh, Matt Damon's playing a gay character on NBC. So brave. And it was like, is he brave because he's playing a gay character? Is he brave because he's doing TV? Like,
oh
like let's
no.
be, you know. But that's interesting because like We're Here, I watched this and I'm like, how are some of these people still on that side of history?
Oh,
It is
that part too.
2024.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you still have this preconceived notion.
and not some, a lot. Like they
Yeah.
find a lot of towns with a lot of primarily bigoted people.
Yeah.
And I know they're always going to fill that drag show at the end of the episode. I know they're going to get to a good place, even if they've filled them with plants. I don't know that.
Right, right.
But
Like if it's just the cast of audience, right?
yeah, but at the same time, it's just like, and you said it, you're like, sometimes they, financially they can't leave or whatever. But what I'm finding so fascinating, especially in the most recent season where they spend more time in each city,
Mhm.
it's their connect, like these people don't want to go because they have connections to people they love that are there. And there's one guy in particular, and I'm not going to spoil it because I've seen the whole season. It hasn't aired the whole season yet, but there's one guy in particular who like just accepts that he's not really accepted by his family. And like he wants his family more than it matters to him. Like he doesn't want to leave his family.
Right.
In a sense, like in my head, I'm like, if they don't really accept you and like they just don't talk about it, why are you spending time with them? Like,
Right.
why are they in your
That's you're
life?
signing up for your own misery at that
I
point.
think so, but so
That
many
is
people are
that
not
is
like
very much
that.
that's very much Brenda Walsh was like in her last season on 90210.
Yeah.
She
It's
was
crazy how this all comes full
she
circle.
was forced to stick around in a neighborhood and around people that really didn't want her around, and it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm so like, I don't understand why people want, I'm using
yeah,
air quotes, community more than they want like I
right.
don't even know if it's self-preservation or like sanity. I don't know what word to use, but I found that I'm like alone and thinking like that. Like most of the people I talk to are like, no, I want to have people around me and like I can overlook certain things. And I'm like,
I
I
don't know.
can't.
There's certain things I cannot overlook.
Yeah.
I'd rather spend a Friday night at home watching Ugliest Houses on in America than like have dinner with flagrant bigots.
Right?
But
Yeah.
it's like interesting. I'm wondering exactly because We're Here is such a great show. But it's interesting. They go into towns and show these people like what gay people can really be like. And like,
Mhm.
what if they took those gay people out of that town and took them to some place to show them what a gay community would look like?
I think that would be a great
You know, like we're
but
here,
like how are
but
you
like
going to set
you're
them up?
here. Yeah,
Right. My concern is like what happens after. Like what you
right,
just said, like if they are like, "Oh my God, I need this." Like how are they going to get the job? How are they going to get the house?
right,
Like
right, right.
I'm thinking about moving out of LA occasionally. It comes into my head. I'm like, it's so hard for
Where do you
me to
go?
do that. Like, where am I going to go get a job? I've worked here for how many years? All the jobs I get now are based on like having connections to help me get the jobs in this industry, especially. It like seems like such a hassle to move. Like I do
That,
kind of
the
understand
first
it.
thing, anytime anyone's like, I'm thinking of moving, I'm like, you have to pack.
I
You
love packing. That's not a problem.
Oh, okay.
Packing is just getting rid of more stuff for me. I'm a very Swedish death cleaning Marie Kondo lifestyle. So
I love that idea, but I also love things.
I get it. No, but then you shouldn't be like that if you love
Like
things.
I have a
Yeah, look
Luke
at your
Perry
backdrop. That's great.
doll. I have a Luke Perry doll from when the show was on.
I didn't realize that was what it was because it was so far in the background and I don't wear my glasses. I had one. Oh no, I didn't. I wasn't allowed to have that doll. Yeah, my parents wouldn't let me have that doll and they wouldn't let me have the New Kids on the Block dolls. And I didn't understand it because I had Ken dolls and I was like, what's the difference?
Right, what is the
Like
difference?
literally they're the same, just with like different color hair.
Yeah. Is it
Anyway,
because New Kids were known for being such troublemakers?
I genuinely don't know. And like I've asked my parents when I got older and they didn't really know why either. They didn't really have a memory of even saying no. So then when I went to college, I bought myself the dolls for no reason. And then I
What
had them in boxes in the closet being like, these aren't going to be worth anything. So I ended up just like selling them again. Cause I'm like, why do I have these? It was just like, I have my own money. I'm going to get the things I didn't, whatever.
I do the same thing where I'm like, or it's like figured out like on eBay, talk about like made possible by pop culture. You can find anything from your childhood,
I
or like
know
those
it's
things.
scary.
It's horrifying. It's horrifying because somebody said like, oh, they got a book that they loved as like a high schooler or like a teenager on eBay, and I was like, oh my God, everything that I like wanted, yeah, it's bad.
But
It's
it's
bad.
also expensive because it's all
So
vintage now.
expensive. But I'm not that guy who's like, I want it, new with tags and no, like
No, but
yeah,
even still, I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure it's way more than it cost when it was originally available.
No, I mean the Battlestar Galactica novels that they released during the original series from the 80s, 70s. It was 79, I think. It came out a
Okay.
year after Star Wars. They did a series of like pretty bad novels I think I got 3 of them for like $6.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
We'll poke around after. Not that we're
yeah,
sponsored. I should say we're not sponsored by eBay. This came up organically.
yeah.
Speaking of, I'm not sponsored by any of the streaming services I'm going to list. I don't get any perks, but I do want to tell you where to find the things that we talked about today in case you were inspired to go watch the things that we talked about today. Damian, you listed so many shows, just listed them that I didn't have time to actually pull all of them. But the ones, the major ones we talked about, Beverly Hills 90210, streaming on Prime Video and Paramount Plus, Melrose Place, also Prime Video and Paramount Plus, and Interview with the Vampire, AMC Plus.
Some of those shows that I mentioned that were like the ripoffs of
They're not available. I can
Yeah.
tell you right now, I know they're not going to be available, but you listed a lot of like the Aaron Spelling shows. And so I would just encourage anybody, there's again, I'm not sponsored by this website, but justwatch.com, plug in the name of any show that you heard that you're excited by. It'll tell you where to find it. It'll tell you streaming. It'll also tell you purchase. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Because you and I are probably very similar in that when we're out with people who don't work in this industry, ask us like, what should I be watching? What did you love? What do you love? Are you watching this? And it's like, or I'll tell them something. They're like, well, where's that? And I can just be like, just go to justwatch.com. You'll be able to find it.
I mean, I'm going to be really a jerk right now and say I actually tell them where to go watch it because I want them to watch it on certain platforms. Netflix will get a lot of that second run stuff. I don't want you to go there. I want you to go where it's actually owned by, like Peacock.
Right, exactly. Go to home base, right.
Yeah, you can watch Resident Evil seasons 1 and 2 on Netflix, or you could go to Peacock and watch 1, 2, and 3 and be fully caught up. So like you need to know where it comes from.
Yeah.
In order to like get the full picture. So, but that's a soapbox for another podcast.
There's also, there's also the joy of Tubi.
There is.
And Pluto TV.
I was going to say, if you're willing to watch ads, which I am not.
This is my idea, is I will watch the ads and I want to talk to somebody, especially at Pluto TV. If you're going to run ads, run regular ads, but every once in a while throw in a classic ad. Like just throw in some like 1970s ad or like
I feel like they would have
maybe an ad that ran during that show in its original run. Give me that. It would be the best time.
Yeah, but I think they'd have to pay for it. And I don't feel like, I think the whole point of their ad system is that it's a money maker.
I'll spend days on YouTube watching like old commercials for like TV events or opening credit sequences.
Oh yeah, I do too.
Yeah. Like I think it's a Knots Landing or a Falcon Crest, one or the other. And there's definitely a Dynasty one. It's a supercut of all of the cast members ever.
Ooh.
The music just like on permanent loop.
I have to find that.
And they just keep editing in the act. It's awesome because you see all the people that were on that show.
Yeah. Okay, that's my assignment for after I edit this podcast.
All right.
Well, thank you, Damian, for coming on. It was so nice to catch up. I'm sad that Bud wasn't here to make an appearance, but that's okay. Another time.
Yes, he'll definitely be up for the next one. We'll do like an animal one.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you, everybody. If you liked, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned for next week, which is season 1's finale. And we have a great guest lined up, but I'm not going to tell you who it is because I want you to come back.
Ooh. And because it's the end of the season, they might die.
Oh.
There's going to be
You're going to feel really bad when you find out who it is now that you've said that.
No.